Hello and welcome to my channel. My name's Ali, and in today's video I'm going to go through some changes you may see in your chinchilla during the autumn and winter time. So the first change in behaviour will be when they become active. Now, chinchillas are crepuscular, which means they're most active at dawn and dusk. And if your dawn and dusk chimes change, then your chinchilla's behaviour will change accordingly. So for example, in the summertime, my chinchillas don't become active till about 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night, because that is when dusk occurs. But in the winter time, that dusk comes a lot quicker. So for example, it starts to get dark in the UK around 4 o'clock during the winter time. So at 4 o'clock, my chinchillas become far more active. And it's the same in the morning. In the morning during the winter time, my chinchillas will still be active at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, whereas in the summertime, they're active between 4 and 5 in the morning, because that is when dawn occurs. So yeah, your chinchillas' activity times will change depending on when dusk and dawn is. So you may find in the wintertime you can have playtime with them a lot earlier in the day than you would in the summertime, because in the summertime they'll be still asleep till 8 o'clock in the evening. But in the wintertime they're awake much sooner. So some of the other changes you may only see if you don't keep your chinchilla in a temperature controlled environment for their entire year. So for example, if your chinchilla is kept in a room that is the same temperature the entire year through, then you're unlikely to see these changes. However, if you keep your chinchilla in a room that's not heated or has lower heating in the winter time, then you may see some of these changes. For example, some of my chinchillas are in an outbuilding connected to my main house, but there is no central heating in that part of the house. I do have a heat source in there. I have an oil fueled radiator that keeps the ambient temperature in that room at around 15 degrees, which is about 60 Fahrenheit, which is much cooler than what they would have in the summertime. So chinchillas are very well adapted to cope with cold weather. It doesn't necessarily mean they actually like the cold all that much, and if you have two chinchillas together, if they are in a cooler environment during the winter time, you will see them snuggling and huddling a lot more, even if they don't particularly like each other, because it's a way of keeping themselves warm, because they use each other's body heat to keep warm. So yeah, more snuggling and more huddling if you have your chinchillas in a colder environment. So one of the things you may see if you keep your chinchilla in a cooler environment during the winter time is that they become less active. Now this is all to do with preserving energy to keep themselves warm. It's more apparent when you have a chinchilla in an environment that has no heating at all. For example, some breeders have their chinchillas in outbuildings and they give them absolutely no heating at all, so it can get to minus temperatures. In those cases, they definitely have slowed down and are less active. Personally, I like to provide my chinchillas with some heat. I don't like it going below 15 degrees, but some breeders just have them completely in the cold and they can cope with it, but they don't necessarily like it that much. Now, I personally have first-hand experience of how chinchillas react to the cold weather. In my chinchilla room, I do have a heat source, but it's a small oil radiator, and my chinchillas during the winter time will get as close to that heat source as they possibly can, because they generally do not like the cold, even though they can cope with it very well. And I've heard other people say they've had their chinchillas gravitate towards the heat source when they have their chinchillas in a room that's not overly hot, and they're confused by it because they think, oh, chinchillas should like the cold, why are they huddling towards the heat source, why are they getting so close towards the heat source? And it's all because, yes, they can cope with the cold very well, but they don't like it that much. So if you keep your chinchilla in a cooler environment during the winter time, you may find that your chinchilla starts to eat more. Now this again is all to do with reserving energy and making sure they have the energy to keep warm. So you may find that their bowls are getting emptier much quicker, and if that's the case, just up their feed, because if their bodies need it, then just up their food. Another thing you may see if you keep your chinchilla in a cooler environment is they may put on weight, and again this is to build up fat reserves so they can keep themselves warm, and is perfectly normal if you have your chinchilla in a colder environment. It's especially noticeable in breeders that don't actually have their heating on, on or don't have heating in their buildings, because the chinchillas need that extra fat to actually keep their bodies insulated and nice and warm, as well as that lovely fur coat on top. So yeah, if you have a chinchilla in a cooler environment, you may find they start to put on a few grams. This is perfectly normal. So if you have your chinchilla in a cooler environment, you may find they are slightly more prone to illness, especially if you have them in a room that has no heating at all. And this is just because, similar to humans, chinchillas are just more prone to illness in extreme weather conditions, especially in the UK, because during the winter time it is very, very humid. There's a lot of moisture in the air. So, for example, during the winter time we get a lot of drizzle, we get a lot of rain, we get a lot of fog. I get lots of mist and fog where I live. People complain that they can't dry their washing during the winter time and this sort of time. It is so, the air is just so damp. Because of this, chinchillas can become more prone to things like ringworm in damp conditions and humid conditions. So it's really important that if you do have a chinchilla in a cooler environment, try and invest in a dehumidifier. This takes the moisture out of the air and will make your chinchillas feel a lot happier. Sometimes your aircon unit will have a dehumidifying setting, so you can actually set it to dehumidify the room, and this is always a wise thing to do if you have your chinchilla in a room that's far cooler or has no heating at all, is to get a dehumidifier, because it takes all that moisture out of the air and will make your chinchillas a lot happier. So in the autumn time, my chinchillas tend to prime, which is where they shed or molt their fur. Now this can happen at any time during the year, but for some reason my chinchillas always seem to do it around the autumn time. Now unless you're showing your chinchillas, you don't need to comb out the fur. The dead fur will normally come out on its own in a dust bath if you give them regular dust baths. Just up their dust baths if they are priming, but it's just something to look out for with your chinchillas. As I say, no need to take any action like putting a comb through them or anything like that unless you're going to be showing them. Or if you have angoras, sometimes it's helpful to put a comb through them when they're priming, because it just gets rid of all that long dead fur. But yeah, other than that, dust baths will sort that out. So yeah, that's all the changes you're really likely to see in a chinchilla during the cold weather. As I've said previously, chinchillas are very well adapted to cope with the cold. Far better than the heat of the summer. You're unlikely to have your chinchilla die because of the cold, but you are likely to have your chinchilla die in the summer from the heat. So cold weather, much better for your chinchilla. However, it's a good idea to keep them comfortable as well, so a nice comfortable temperature. So just to recap of the potential behavioural differences between summer and winter time. Active times will change. The time that your chinchillas are awake will change dramatically during the winter time. If you don't keep your chinchillas in a heated room, then your chinchillas may snuggle more and become less active and will eat more and put on more weight. And if you have your chinchillas in a cold environment that's also quite humid, you may be slightly more prone to things like ringworm and illnesses in general. So just keep an eye on that. If they are in an exceptionally cold environment and it's quite humid, just keep an eye on it. Maybe have a dehumidifier in the room to help with that humidity. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you found it informative, and I will see you in another video soon. Goodbye for now.